Welcome to Knowing the Father podcast with Ray Eppard, a podcast focused on helping you have a rich personal relationship with your Heavenly Father. Now, here's your host, Ray Eppard.
Hello, I hope you're having a great day today. God's mercy endures forever, and His mercies are new and fresh every morning. And as we come to know Him, then we come to know that is a truth, it is a reality that we can get up with every morning. Today, in talking about knowing the Father, there's a lot of things with this that what I'm looking to do is kind of eliminate hindrances to our walk with God. That if we have wrong thoughts or inaccurate thoughts about who He is, then it can really hinder us from knowing Him. It can cause us to withdraw from Him and to not really enter in to getting to know Him, because we think He's somebody that He's actually not. But once we know who He really is, then we will go to Him freely. Now, with that, we're talking about the concept. We've been hitting this so many different ways. A lot of times people say, well, everything happens for a reason, which, to put in biblical, spiritual, not in biblical, but put in a spiritual dynamic, that means everything that happens in my life, God has planned it and He has purposed it. To which I would say, no, that is not true. Everything that happens in your life is not planned by God, and it is not purposed by God. And we're trying to show different ways that this just isn't accurate. Now today, what I want to look at is Galatians chapter 6 and verse 7. Very familiar passage. And the people that believe that everything happens for a reason will also quote this verse. Well, they can't both be true. They both can't be true in one sense. He says here in Galatians 6:7, he says, "Do not be deceived. God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap." Now, the concept that I'm wanting us to look at today in this regard is when he says, don't be deceived. In other words, don't be fooled about this. Whatever you sow, that you're going to get. When I was a kid and we would plant our garden in the spring and early summer, one year, especially when I was really young, my dad let me have one little section where I planted what I wanted to plant. Well, guess what? God is really not the one that determined what went in that section. I planted some watermelon. I planted some corn. I didn't plant any potatoes or any green beans. I wanted corn. I wanted watermelon. I also planted some cantaloupe. That's what I wanted. You see, God gave us a free will. Now, with that doesn't always mean that we get to determine everything about our lives, but we particularly get to determine our responses to life and what we set in motion in regard to those circumstances in life. And it's to that he said, don't be deceived. God's not mocked. Whatever you sow, you're going to reap. You can't control what comes into your life entirely, but you can control what you set in motion in response to that. You can set in motion forgiveness. You can set in motion unforgiveness. See, the truth of the matter in life is God's not choosing, you are. God's not picking it. At that point, there are people that have held on to bitterness and they've held on to unforgiveness. And that's how they function in life. And then they wonder why God doesn't let them have a good relationship with that part of the family or that person. The thing of it is, it's not God that's causing that problem. It's what they're holding on to, it's what they're sowing, and it's what they're creating. And at times, we've just got to understand God isn't picking everything that comes into our lives. And that whole idea of everything happens for a reason, well, in one sense, that is true. There is a cause to everything. Some things happen because, you might have somebody in your family that, for lack of a better way of putting it, well, I'll try not to use the slang terms. It wasn't vulgar, but it's still not nice. But they might not be walking in love. They might be holding the grudge, and you're dealing with it. Yeah, there is a reason for that. It's because they won't let it go, or they've got this idea that's causing them to go off on the deep end. But at that point, you didn't cause that. God didn't cause it either. It was their thinking. It was whatever they allowed to get into their mind, and then they sowed that into their life that created the problem. Again, God's not choosing. We are. God's not choosing. People are. And that creates things that we have to deal with. God's not behind the bad stuff that comes into our lives. Well, I pray that you continue with us on this journey of knowing the Father, because it is truly the greatest journey of all.
You've been listening to Knowing the Father with Ray Eppard. Remember to subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Podbean, Stitcher, YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter.